You are all very welcome to Halted Lives, an online conversation from Plan International. And for anyone tuning in who might not know, Plan International is a development and humanitarian group that works to end child poverty and promote equality for girls across 77 countries. At the core of their work is ensuring girls can learn, lead, decide for themselves, and thrive in all aspects of their lives. Some of their recent campaigns include We Need to Talk, period, about the ongoing serious problem of period poverty around the world, and the Free to Be Online campaign, discussing and challenging the online harassment of girls and young women, and I can tell you, not so young women sometimes, online. Today, we are talking about halting lives and the impact of the pandemic on the lives of girls and young women specifically. And we have four very impressive young women making up our discussion panel today from Plan International's Youth Advisory Panel, which is a group engaged by Plan to bring their voices to the table. I think we all know how pointless it is and frustrating to discuss the welfare of women without including any or speaking to any. So it's great to see so many young women sharing their thoughts. Now, we don't have a huge amount of time today, so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Kate, Victory, Aine and Mairead. Now, if you don't mind, I will ask each of you to introduce yourselves and just say a few lines about who you are. So I don't know, Kate, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so my name is Kate and I've just qualified from Mairead. I'm a primary school teacher now. So currently based in Limerick, but hoping to move to Dublin to the big smoke, I suppose, for September. And I suppose continue the work of Plan then throughout the primary schools and bring global education to the Irish classroom.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Kate. Victory?
Yeah, hi, I'm Victory. I am a 22-year-old Nigerian Irish global health student. I'm studying in the Netherlands remotely, but currently based in Laos. I am passionate about gender equality and sexual reproductive health and rights, maternal and child health. So I'm just trying to work more in that area, work with Plan in that area as a youth advisor. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Aine, over to you.
Yeah, my name is Aine. I live in Dublin right now. I graduated last year from UCD with a social science degree. I currently do social care with under 18s in a residential unit. And hopefully I'll be moving to London next September. This September, to pursue a master's in gender, peace and security, which was quite inspired by my work with Plan and by the work I did in my undergrad. That's me.
That's great. And finally, Mairead.
My name is Mairead. I'm 19. I'm going to my second year of European Studies in Trinity. So I'm hoping to actually be on campus next year. And I'm really interested in the intersectionality between history, politics, society, and the issues that we face. And that's something that I've loved working with Plan.
That is such an incredible cross-section of skills you all have, and you're all learning from teaching to social skills to gender studies and sexuality. And it's just incredible. So I'm in awe of all of you already. And I think the thing about this, the pandemic is, I don't think rarely, certainly, I mean, I'm older than you, but rarely certainly in my life, even my dad was saying there's 80 in his life, bar post-war time, rarely has a time divided people so much. You know, the start was all, oh, we're in it together, but really it's proven that life is so relative to the individual, you know, your gender, your age, your demographic, your background, everything. And I think this has really highlighted that. And I've seen across I'm probably in that generation where there are people my age in midlife whose jobs haven't changed, who have their mortgage, and they've probably been maybe the least affected, arguably. I know lots of people have, myself included, but I think every demographic and generation has been affected in a drastically different way. But I think for younger people, there are some people, for example, a friend of mine's son was doing his leaving cert last year, 2020, or was supposed to. So we kept talking about what he's missed out on. And you know what he said? He said, I don't even know what I have missed out on, because he said, I never got a chance he didn't do his leaving cert, but he did it at home. He didn't go to college. I thought that's really interesting, that there's a generation of younger people now who that particular year, who don't even know what they're missing out on. Whereas, you know, a lot of people had started college, they know what they have been missing out on, they know what they want to get back to. But for all of you, what I'd like to start with, I guess, is, how has it affected each of you on a personal level? I don't know who'd like to go first. Kate, as a teacher, how has it affected you?
Well, I was heading into my final year, I suppose, when the pandemic hit. Like, I just had to finish off third year and then I was starting fourth year.
Yeah.
So in a way, I was kind of at an advantage because I knew I was going to be living at home from September to December anyway, because I was on teaching practice. So not that much had changed for me. So I thought kind of going into teaching practice, but then it was heading into the whole school environment and everything was uprooted. We didn't know whether we'd be getting into schools. We didn't know whether they'd be opening. When we finally got into the schools, we were teaching with masks on. All of the actual teaching style had to change. We couldn't do any kind of group work. Resources had to be at a minimum. We couldn't share anything with children. And I had a class of, it was 27 first class kids, so they're all about 6 or 7 years old, and trying to keep them in their pods and sitting still. And you know, you can't go talk to your friend over there, and you can't, and even like in PE times we couldn't do mingling. It was really hard to kind of keep them in that way. So I do feel sorry for, I know in a way like we've been affected so much, but I think being out in schools, I was able to see there's these wee young kids who didn't fully understand what was going on. They just knew they couldn't sit with their friends, and they had this whole vocabulary as well that they shouldn't have at that young age. You know, they had isolating and hand sanitizing and washing, and they knew they couldn't touch these things because of this and this, but they didn't fully grasp what was going on. And it was really hard to stand there, you know, as an unqualified teacher, still learning, and be like, yeah, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. And they were asking me so many difficult questions that I didn't have the answer to.
Thing is, Kate, you're actually not unqualified. That's the lovely thing, because nobody is qualified for this, you know. And I can tell immediately from you that you are really bright and articulate and enthusiastic, and you love what you are beginning to do in life. So I don't think anyone could actually be qualified. Like my little boy started junior infants last September, and he sanitizes his hands now, and he knows about, oh, it's heartbreaking, but you know, it's people like you that made it so much easier for children like him. So, you know, I wouldn't think for a second that you're unqualified at all.
I feel like everyone at this stage feels unqualified to be living in a pandemic, no matter what you're doing. Nobody really knows what they're doing.
I know. And you know what you said there, which is really interesting, and I've seen everybody across the ages now, nearly a year and a half later, saying it, is that like, oh, I know what the people are worse off. And sometimes you have to remind ourselves that it's okay to whinge about, you know, maybe someone has cancelled a wedding, and okay, not the end of the world compared to somebody who might have lost a loved one, but you're entitled to be annoyed about even cancelling a holiday. You're entitled to be peed off about that, you know. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves that it's not healthy to say, well, people are worse off, and just, you know, keep it all inside, that you are entitled to, you know, yes, we have to be mindful of other people going through worse things, but we are all entitled to give out, you know. I want to kick a wall. Moving on then, Aine, maybe to you next. How has it affected you personally, this awful last nearly year and a half?
So I think I was quite lucky in that I was finishing my undergrad and knew I was taking a year out when the pandemic hit. So it was, I only had 2 months left in my undergrad. So that was really weird, doing that at home from my childhood bedroom after living away for like 4 years. That was bizarre, but it was fine. And I actually knew the next year, like I wouldn't be in college, I'd be in a very like front facing role. So I had secured employment for the September coming with Focus Ireland. I did like aftercare, so working with 18 to 21 year olds. So I had secured employment for that come that September. So when the pandemic hit, I was in actually quite an all right position in terms of like college and work and all that kind of stuff, to be honest. And it sounds really superficial, but the thing that has impacted for me like the most is my social skills. Honestly, like I haven't met a new friend in a year and a half. Like I've been with the same set of probably about 10 people. I live with my roommates and I like talk to a few other friends, but like I haven't had the opportunity to meet new people in quite a long while, except for through work. So with me moving in September to London, that's going to be a huge, massive shift because they're so far ahead of us as well. And just the idea of getting back out into the world and having to make social connections again is genuinely quite stressful. And it would have been something that I would have been very used to in college and, you know, all that kind of thing. But that's genuinely like, and it sounds again really superficial, but it is such an important part of being in your early 20s. Like,
it doesn't, for anybody, I mean, I've spent so much last year with a 5-year-old. I can barely string a sentence together now. I'm lucky I can even hold it together now. I don't think that's superficial. I think a lot of us have become almost slightly agoraphobic, you know. People can't wait to get back into a bar. And you go, well, actually, I'm almost slightly afraid to. So I don't think it's superficial in any way at all. What about you, Victory? How have you been affected personally?
So I think, obviously, like the last year has been difficult. I was in the middle of my final year as well. And I was in Scotland, so I did my undergrad in Scotland. And it was all happened very fast, between being in the lecture 1 week and then being like locked down the next week. And then, I was in a different country. My family's back in Ireland. And so that was also very difficult, trying to navigate how I would get home and what would happen with all my stuff in one country and like nothing in the other country, but wanting to be around my family in this really uncertain time. So I was lucky enough to be able to get back home and spend my remainder of my fourth year back home with my family, but that was incredibly difficult in terms of motivation. Like I'm trying to write a dissertation and finish off exams and like try and finish off strong with everything, with confusion. Like the teachers or the lecturers, the supervisors, no one really knew how they were going to like proceed with exams and what was going to happen. And so there was just this uncertainty looming over fourth year and how that would end up looking like. And so that was very difficult. I think for me, I lacked a lot of motivation to finish strong. And yeah, but I think I adapted, like many other people, I'm sure. I managed to figure that out and figure out what to do next, which was not what I had in mind. Like I was also planning to take a year out, but then sitting at home so much and trying to like, yeah, reevaluate what is life now with when you can't make plans. Like, do you plan? Like, how do you proceed with existing and living and like thriving during a pandemic? Can you even do that? So that was a lot of retrospective and introspective thinking during the pandemic. And then I ended up finding a master's to do, which was very like spontaneous. It wasn't necessarily planned. It just sort of came across.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I thought you were going to say, I lost my motivation, so I took up baking bread. But no, you did a master's. Okay, well, that's extraordinarily impressive, Victory.
Yeah, I think it's more like a weird form of procrastination. Like, oh, I don't really know what to do, so I might just do a master's. Yeah, that was really the thinking behind it. But yeah, I mean, I think in that way, I've been very privileged in a lot of different ways because I was able to start that master's, and it was in a different country. I said it was in the Netherlands, and so I was able to go for a few months because they were in a different position to us in Ireland at the time. So yeah, so it was difficult at the start. I think I managed to adapt. It was really nice being around family, and I think that helped a lot. Because if I'm still in Scotland at like finishing fourth year, I think I would have struggled so much more, definitely. So yeah, it was a strange time for sure. It was difficult being around family. It was fun, but it was also a lot. You, like Anya said, you're going back to your childhood bedroom that I like looked around and it's like bright green, and I'm doing Zoom calls in this like bright green room. I'm like, no, this is not me, but this is very strange.
Yeah, and also you can't even, I mean, I remember moving home for 6 months before I bought my apartment. This is going back 15 years. And, you know, I was back in my childhood bedroom, but I was going to work. I was going out to meet my friends. Everything else was normal. It was just my choice to move back in before I bought my apartment to save a few quid at that time, but to have everything else taken away from you. And, you know, when you talk about motivation, Victory, I think across the board, a year and a half ago, there were people saying, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to learn the piano. I'm going to take up Chinese. And I admire people who did any of those things, but I tried to. And after a few months, I realized, stop beating yourself up. Because I think sometimes we have to, like you say, you have to exist. You have to get through it and be fluid and be open to reevaluating and to change. Because if we're not, then it would be soul destroying, because we still don't know what's going to happen and I hate the term the new normal, but what our lives are, what our reality is going to look like in the next few months. So we have to be fluid. And the great thing about all of you is that, you know, you are. And finally, to you, Mairead.
And I suppose I was at a slightly different stage. Like your friend's son, I was meant to do my leaving cert the year that obviously the pandemic started. So it was sort of very strange for me because one day I left school and I never went back in. And I think what I found particularly hard was that there was no sense of closure. We didn't do a leaving cert. We didn't have a graduation. We had no debs, and I was nearly more upset about the debs than the leaving cert, to be honest. But it was very hard. And then I was very lucky then to get my first choice of course, but it almost feels like you're an imposter because everyone else throughout the history of the leaving cert got in based off of exams, whereas I didn't. So it felt as if you shouldn't be there. And then, of course, starting first year in a pandemic environment, I moved up to Dublin for my first semester, but I was staying in a friend's house. I was sitting in a room by myself. I've never been inside of a lecture hall for the entire year. I used to go into the library and sit there by myself. I was lucky that I got very involved with things like Plan and with different societies in college. So I have a lot of friends, but I have not met them in real life, and it's all been very virtual. So it's been very isolating. And then particularly, like what everyone else has been saying, I moved home then, and that was tough because for me, going to college was getting that independence. You know, becoming a new person, meeting new people, whereas I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, and while I was doing college and I was going to my classes and my lectures, doing my work, it didn't feel as if I was. And then when we got our results, it was very anticlimactic because it felt, oh my God, I've just finished my first year of college and I feel as if I've just finished secondary school. It was very strange. And it's been a very isolating experience. And like, I've been lucky that I got very involved. Like, I know there's lots of people who haven't been. And I suppose my courses, I had a lot of smaller classes, but still it was tough, you know, going onto a Zoom call and staring at a blank screen of people who don't know, I will never meet. Yeah, so it was very difficult. And I suppose it was that kind of like disenchantment. Like, I had always been so excited about going to college and I'd always wanted to go to Trinity, and I'd imagine myself like normal people or something that I'd be walking through, and, you know, I'd meet these amazing people. And while I have, and it's been online, it has been very strange. And yeah, I feel like I've missed out on a lot, and that sense of closure, I think, has been the key thing that I found hard.
Yeah, that's the thing where I think everyone's life certainly has been interrupted, but to hear you talk about that, it's people who've missed genuine milestones, without depressing you further, that you can't get back. You know, you're not going to go back and have your last day in 6th year again, you know, when you're throwing eggs at people, or sorry, that's what we did. That was very 1990s. But, you know, and the debs, those things that are real sort of concrete milestones that you know, you won't be able to go back and do. Now you will have other experiences, and hopefully next year now you'll be back on campus and you will be able to kind of fill in those gaps. But, you know, my heart goes out to people like you who have missed those milestones. And I think, you know, the only thing you can do, which you clearly have, and you're clearly so motivated and self-motivated that you've got involved with things, you know, and you have to do that, because the alternative is, you know, really not terribly attractive at all, because you could sink into pretty grim depression if you didn't try and find an outlet where you could. And on that one, I wanted to ask all of you, it's a question I was going to ask later, but seeing as the social aspect has kind of come up a lot, there's been over the last year a sort of consistent media narrative, I feel, of kind of dividing teenagers and young adults into kind of two camps, that either they're crying in their old bedrooms and not seeing anybody, or they're out at illegal raves. Now, I don't know what government minister decided that a party in a field's an illegal rave, because like every party was an illegal rave over the last year. It was hilarious. But it seemed like there were two big extremes. And the younger people that I know weren't like that at all. But how did you feel about that kind of trope being trotted out? I don't know who wants to answer that.
I just know from one of my, so I lived in the Netherlands for a year in 3rd year, and so I have a lot of friends over there. And Victory, maybe you'll have similar things with this, but one of my friends, he's a like journalist, and he wrote, I think, kind of a series about the experiences of young people in different countries in Europe throughout the pandemic. So he did Ireland, he did Spain, he did Italy, and he did the Netherlands. And like the thing is in Dutch, but I use Google Translate to read it. But the difference in the way that young people were viewed in these other countries versus the way that they were here is immense. Like, it is crazy. He would be speaking over the phone with me saying, like, what do you mean, like, you guys aren't allowed to do X, Y, Z? What do you mean the media is saying this about you guys? Like, Victor, I don't know if this is the case, but he seemed to think that in the Netherlands it was very much a case of the poor young people, they're missing out on so much, versus where in Ireland I feel it was a little bit more like, again, like you say, either they're not doing anything and that is the only way to be good in this pandemic, or they're going out to illegal raves and they're all terrible and X, Y, Z. So I just think it's really interesting to see, even across Europe, the difference in the way that the young people were portrayed and the way that young people were viewed throughout the pandemic, because it wasn't the same as here at all from that article anyway.
Were you aware of that, Victory, at all from anyone you know in the Netherlands?
Yeah, for sure. I was while I was there, it was very much we were I was in university, and the motto at my university was it was something along the lines of like, let's get you on campus as much as you can because you're missing out. Like, you deserve on campus. So they had us like on a rota, and they did the social distancing, the mask, everything, but they were like, you like Anya said, like, for young people, like, you guys are missing out on that social aspect, and it's so important. I think our lecturers are more devastated at that than us. They're like trying to plan the parties. They're like, we can't, like, you deserve to socialize, go for picnics, go to the park, do it socially distanced, but like do it because you need that. And I think that was very much the rhetoric there. Like, I had friends speaking to them, and they're like, yeah, like, it's very much like, take responsibility for yourself, but you know, you need to like have that social interaction as best as you can, whichever way that you can. Otherwise it's like, it can be detrimental for your mental health and for everything. So it was very different coming back home, and I would be on the phone to my mum and I'd be like, it's so weird, and she'd be like, yeah, it's very strange, like the rhetoric in Ireland being, yeah, this thing of like the young people they're the ones spreading it, and they're the ones like that are with like
we're all killing our grandmothers. It's like, oh, come on, I was just going to buy an ice cream. And that's the thing about I think also in my experience of people of all ages, if you trust people and you give them your trust, there's always one or two of all ages who will throw it back in your face, but most people will take it and do the right thing with it. And I think if you constantly, I mean, you girls are slightly older, but you know, say teenagers, to be treated like you just can't be trusted. Like, you know, why don't we just trust them? Why don't we see what they do with our trust? You know, it's, I mean, Kate, as a teacher, would you understand that? I know you teach younger children, but, you know, I think give people trust and
yeah,
just
definitely.
be okay.
And I think half of the viewpoint came from, you know, like Ireland is such a tradition of like community caring and looking after the elderly, and you know, they mightn't have the same kind of care of the elderly, I suppose, in other countries. Like it's such a tradition of, you know, if your grandparents get sick, they move in with you, and like that's just such a tradition in Ireland. So I feel like in the pandemic, whenever they realised how much it was affecting older people, it was like, right, everyone has to look after the old people, and that's it. Like you don't really have a choice. So blah, blah, blah. Which obviously we did have to look after them, show they were vulnerable and everything, but kind of there was no focus put on, right, how are we going to look after the younger people and the middle-aged people and the people that are trying to balance looking after their own kids and their parents and the people that are out working on the front line in the shops, and the people, you know, it was mostly just like look after the elderly, the rest will manage through themselves. So I think that was kind of a bit of a trick that we all missed without even realizing it kind of at the start.
Yeah, I think you're right at the start. That was kind of the message that went out, and that was the right message at the time. But I don't think certainly the government wasn't quick enough to adapt. And we've talked a lot about being fluid and adapting. And the one thing the government is slow to do is adapt. I want to make sure we can get on to discussing like inequality, like gender inequality. And between the four of you, have you seen inequality worsen over the last year and a half in any aspect? I don't know if anybody would like to take that.
Certainly the pandemic has sort of highlighted and exacerbated many of the inequalities, because much of our life during the pandemic has certain prerequisites, like if you're working from home or if you're studying from home, you know, even something simple like you need a quiet place to work. If you're someone who's homeless living in a hotel, you're living with your whole family, or if you're in direct provision, or even something as simple as if you share a room with your sibling, how are you going to do that? Or laptops, internet access, you know, I think that inequalities have certainly worsened. And I think the problem is sometimes, which is natural, we're all very focused on ourselves during such a trying time. And I think we can forget that there's other things going on. And I think the news being so dominated by kind of numbers of cases, which are obviously very important news, but we're sort of pushing aside many of the other inequalities that are still existing, that have always existed. And I think as well, especially at the moment now, we can see a great disparity between the experience of the pandemic in the global north and the global south. Even I was just reading there in the newspaper that the Africa has had a really terrible experience recently with the pandemic. Their cases are rising, whereas everywhere in the Western world and in sort of the global north, cases are going down. We're getting vaccines, whereas these vaccines aren't going to these poorer countries. So that is just worsening and heightening these issues. And it's just, I think we're being quite self-centered, which is natural, but I think that's not sustainable as the pandemic progresses, and like COVID will always be around. So we need to sort of take stock of what we have, and you know, the COVID will never be over until we've all been vaccinated. And same with all inequalities. If there's an inequality somewhere in the world, then there's still an inequality. We have to, you know, not be as focused on our own lives in our own country.
Yeah, that's very well said, Mairead. And I think it's very true that it has highlighted not just gender inequality, but across the board. You know, the have and the have-nots, people who didn't have very much now are in a far worse position than the people who, well, let's face it, some people have, you know, done quite well over the last year and a half, but that's a whole other conversation. How does it make you feel as young women when you hear that decades of progress with gender equality has been set back. And certainly from my perspective as, as a mother in her 40s, no, nothing wrong with in your 40s, as a mother in her 40s, I've noticed that this is interesting to me, that it took for men to be forced to stay at home and work for things to start to kind of be spoken out more about childcare, because I think for more men to be able to go, oh my God, this is what the reality of childcare and juggling is. Now, that's not part of your lives yet, but I can certainly see how, even with working from home, the pressures of domestic life still falls to women. And how does it make you feel as young women when you hear that that kind of setback has happened over the last year and a half? I don't know if you'd like to take that.
It's actually interesting, because last March, whenever I moved home, I had done a bit of work like when I was a teenager as like a babysitter, a childminder, and I have never had as many phone calls as last March whenever childcare closed, from fathers, husbands being like, I can't do this, I can't work from home and have the kids, like, are you available to mind them a few days a week, a few hours a day, anything? And I think it really kind of just showed that it took people working at home to realize how essential the childcare kind of industry is in that way. And then I suppose as well, when you look at the other kind of inequalities that females are facing, like the increase in domestic violence, and even when you look at it, even on a kind of healthcare level, the fact that women are now in delivery rooms and delivering babies themselves until the last minute having in, it's really hard to see, okay, when are we going to be able to get this back to, I suppose, as normality was, where domestic violence cases are down and women have that support in kind of delivery wards and things like that. It's like, when are we going to have that switch? How are we going to go back to it? Is it going to be addressed, or is it just going to be accepted that this is part of the new normal, that these things happen? So it is kind of disheartening in that way to see all this progress almost down the drain in a way. But I do think the fact that I suppose men and the male population are seeing how essential the traditional work of a woman was, that it may be spoken about more and it may be addressed more.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's shown how much we need support structures, social support structures, everything from schools to our libraries to, even kind of more recreational social supports, good government supports. Like we need, this is how society and communities function. We can't function without everybody pulling together. And kind of on that as well, moving on to mental health, how have you all looked after your mental health over the last year and a half? How have your friends looked after their mental health? Is it something that you feel is being spoken about enough? Aine, I'll come to you on that. Is it something that you think needs to be highlighted and addressed more?
Well, I think that it is constantly being highlighted and addressed, but it's not going anywhere. Like, there's constant news about mental health, and there's constant stuff about mental health in the news. There's constant, we need to do more for XYZ. Great, so where's the policies coming in? Where's the funding coming from? Like, there's nothing coming from it. Like, we can talk and talk about it until the cows come home, but like, there's no actual change happening. Like, I'm very open about this. Like, I've been to counselling a number of times in my life. It's kind of a thing that if I notice that I'm going through a bit of a dip, I'll call up my counsellor and be like, hey, I'm coming back for a few weeks. But that's not, it costs me €40 every time I go, and that's a discount. That's not a luxury that everyone can have access to. So like, myself as a privileged white woman living in Ireland who's middle class, like, I can afford to do that. But a lot of the clients that I would have had when I worked at Focus Ireland, they were also like 18 to 21 age range. They had to wait on waiting lists for mental health help for ages, and then because of one small kind of clerical error, they wouldn't be able to access it. And like, they're the people who have the least social support. They're the people who have the least access to family members, least, like, they don't have a lot of friends. Like, I'm lucky that even if I am having a particularly bad day, I'll go to my roommates. They're fairly good at, like, supporting me, or my family. But yeah, I don't think it's talked about a lot, but nothing actually comes from it. You still have to access private counselling if you need help.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Victory, coming to you, do you think that there's anything on mental health that could be done better? I mean, Aine touched on it there. I mean, what do you feel that you and your generation and your friends need to kind of, I guess, build back better from this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Aine touched on it really well. Like, those policies, that funding that needs to be there, that structure and social support structure needs to be there, because like Aine said, for me, I also started therapy during the pandemic, because I mean, if I wasn't going to talk to someone, I was going to talk to myself. And it's like, let me like talk to someone. And I was really privileged in that I was able to find a really great organization that was offering therapy for free, or pay what you can, which is also really great if you have the ability to do that. But I recognize it's not available to everyone, and especially coming from like a marginalized community, or coming from being Nigerian and being Black in Ireland. It's so important to have culturally sensitive therapy and culturally appropriate counseling, and not everyone has access to that. I mean, if you're coming from, but you're in a direct provision center, you're coming from different backgrounds, it's so important to have therapy and counseling that's sensitive to you. And I think that this is important. It's one thing to be able to access your university's counseling, or any therapist, private therapist or counselor, but it's another thing to be able to get one that works for you. Like, I have had friends who've gone through counselors after counselors, and they're like, I'm not, like, I didn't like this person, I didn't like the way it was going, this person was insensitive to like my specific the you know needs, things that I'm going through, maybe a much more structural level as well. So I think that that's important to be able to get, this is where, for me, community care is so important. Like, I come from a culture of just community care, and the importance of community care, like therapy and counseling, is so important. Get it, but also community, like tap into your community, whoever they are, your family, your friends, the grassroots organizations that will care for you and do care for you. Like, tap into that, because they will, like, having that advocacy behind you, having that support behind you, having someone that you could be like, ring up and be like, hey, like, I'm feeling this type of way, and just that will sit on the phone if they say nothing, is so important. And that's what I was really privileged to have, or really blessed to have over the pandemic period with my friends. Like, I was able to build stronger networks and community ties with the people in my life, and like doing stuff like this with plan, and making new friends and meeting new people, and building more, like, a stronger community around you, or like-minded, was really important. But funding policies and the right type of counseling and therapy needs to be put in place. That is
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we have this idea that Ireland is a super friendly place and we're all about community. And I'll be honest, again, I'm older than you guys, that hasn't, for the most part of my life, been my experience. You know, you really have to seek it out, and often you need money to seek it out. And I think sometimes that idea that Ireland is one big cozy community it's really, like I said, it certainly hasn't been my experience for a lot of my life. Mairead, just coming to you finally on mental health. When you started third level in such an unusual way, were you offered any additional emotional or mental health supports, or were you aware of any?
I was very lucky, with Trinity. They have a really great support system. We had mentors, and we were getting lots of emails about different counselling services and where we could go to for help with the Students' Union or with other groups. I personally didn't avail of them, but and like I do know that there has been major problems in all third level institutions with accessing those supports, that there's been long waiting lists, as has been kind of brought up by a number of the other girls here. But yeah, I think more of what I've had help with and my sort of mental health support has been through sort of more grassroots things like societies, being with friends, family. But I think that those institutional practices should be in place as well, because just meeting up with people isn't always enough for everyone.
Yeah, that's it. I think sometimes, I think we what we didn't have in Ireland when I was growing up is almost kind of forcing people to talk, even teaching civics in school, teaching when you're going to sit in the classroom, we're going to talk about ideas and feelings, and almost force kids to do it, because it gets to the stage where you might become an adult, but you don't even know where to begin. But if you've sort of been raised, and I know that's something that they do a little bit in the Netherlands, certainly in Scandinavia, where another friend of mine lives, I don't know where they're very much, they do that kind of civic social structure in school that I feel is still a little bit lacking here, but hopefully something that we can build on. But I think, we need more access to mental health services, more funding, but also just to make it much, much simpler to get it. I think that is the key. Now, I'm very aware that time is absolutely flying by, and I really want to end on a more positive, uplifting note. So I'd like to ask you all, I'm going to come to you first, Kate. What are you looking forward to over the next while? Like, not the next months, the coming years, kind of post-pandemic. What are you looking forward to?
Oh, I'm so looking forward to be able to travel again. I had massive plans for summer 2020 for interrailing around Europe and kind of Eastern Europe, which all went down the drain. But no, I'm just excited to get out there again. And I spent a few summers abroad teaching English, so I'd love to get out again. And hopefully I suppose now that I'm teaching, I'll have my Christmases off and my summers off, so I definitely won't be wasting any of them. I'll be making sure every second I free is going somewhere. But apart from that, it's even just the normality within Ireland, you know, getting out for your cups of coffee, meeting your friends. Like, I never thought
illegal raves, Kate. Illegal raves. We're all looking forward to it.
Yeah,
we all want a legal rave again.
Yeah, basically. Festivals, anything really at this stage. I'll take whatever's going.
What about you, Victory? What is on your looking forward to list?
Honestly, it's really just seeing friends and family in person that I've just been virtually connecting with over the past year now. So giving people hugs is like such a big thing. It's like physical touch. I look forward to that. And like, yeah, I've got family all over the world, and it would be amazing to be able to go and see them. And yeah, like Kate said, travel, and yeah, anything going, like get like the parties, like let's do it, let's go for it. Weddings, like people are like having like 6 people at their wedding. Like I'm missing weddings and like seeing celebration in person, and celebrating with people. So I'm really excited for that.
Isn't it awful how we've all become? I mean, the thing about I still am a really very tactile person, but now you keep your distance, and it's almost reprogrammed us to just stay away from people, which is so alien to somebody who's a naturally warm person. And like once my parents were vaccinated and I was vaccinated, I was like, come on, hugs. And I felt like I was somehow endangering them. And we have to almost teach ourselves how to function as a warm, normal, tactile person again. I mean, I can't wait for it. And what about you, Anya? What are you looking forward to?
Same exact things, just meeting people again, seeing people I haven't seen in ages. I've a lot of friends abroad, so I'm very excited to get to visit them. And yeah, like Victory said, like celebrating things with people, like anything. Honestly, at this stage, anything at all.
Anything.
Like, I do not care what the occasion is. Let's have a party. I don't mind. Like, I'm just so excited to meet people again. Nervous.
I got a feeling. Let's have a post-dental party. Yay! With ice cream.
Like, it's hard because we haven't done it in so long, and it's going to be a learning curve again, but it's going to be worth it. Like, I'm so excited to.
Well, it's really odd. I went out for my first meal with a couple of friends last week, and we were sitting outdoors, and I wasn't dressed appropriately because there was no outdoor heaters, which are a bad thing for the environment, but I was freezing, and I kind of forgot how to do polite conversation. It was really odd. I was sitting there, and then I realized I was just being a real moany old cow. I was like, okay, you're cold, eat the chicken wings, just smile. But I almost have to build back up to being social again. It's very odd. What about you, Mairead?
Yeah, like what everyone's been saying, I really want to meet people again and go traveling abroad, and like I just want to sit in a lecture hall and try and concentrate and take notes, and I don't know, talk to a person beside me when I'm sitting in the classroom. But yeah, I just want to sort of have a sort of normal college experience and live an independent life, go out every night, I don't know. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Of course, I'm apprehensive, but I think with the way things are going, definitely there's positives and there's light at the end of the tunnel finally.
Yeah. Did you buy your debs dress? Did you have your debs dress bought?
I did, and it's sitting downstairs. Yeah, it's still in the bag, so hopefully there'll be some balls in Trinity that I'll be able to go to. I'll be wearing it out to the shops, I'll be wearing it everywhere. So
I thought you were going to stand up and go, ta-da!
I've never been to a nightclub or anything, so I'm excited for that, hopefully.
Well, listen, I think like we're almost out of time there. So I really want to thank Plan International for coordinating this event. And I really want to thank you for Mairead, Kate, Anya and Victory. Thank you so much for your time, for your enthusiasm, for being so engaged and for being part of the Youth Advisory Panel. I am absolutely in awe of all four of you. I think you're incredible. And again, without sounding in any way condescending, it is so reassuring to virtually meet four people like you who make me feel the future for women is so much brighter. So please keep doing what you're doing. And if I'm not too old, can you please invite me to one of your post-lockdown parties? Please.
Of course.
Of course.
So, thank you all. That wasn't that sincere. Yeah, sure. Thank you all so much. And I'm wishing you all the best for a pleasant post-pandemic future.